The master-slave dialectic from Hegel's phenomenology of Geist. Lord and bondsman. In this experience, self-consciousness becomes aware that life is as essential to it as pure self-consciousness. In immediate self-consciousness, the simple ego is absolute object, which, however, is for us, or in itself, absolute mediation, and has as its essential moment substantial and solid independence. The dissolution of that simple unity is the result of the first experience. Through this there is posited a pure self-consciousness, and a consciousness which is not purely for itself, but for another, in essence as an existent consciousness. Consciousness in the form and shape of thinghood. Both moments are essential, since in the first instance they are unlike and opposed, and their reflection into unity has not yet come to light. They stand as two opposed forms or modes of consciousness. The one is independent, and its essential nature is to be for itself. The other is dependent, and its essence is life or existence for another. The former is the master or lord, the latter the bondsman. The master is the consciousness that exists for itself, but no longer merely the general notion of existence for self. Rather, it is a consciousness existing on its own account, which is mediated with itself through an other consciousness, in essence through an other whose very nature implies that it is bound up with an independent being, or with thinghood in general. The master brings himself into relation to both these moments, to a thing as such, the object of a desire, and to the consciousness whose essential character is thinghood. And since the master is A, qua notion of self-consciousness, an immediate relation of self-existence, but B is now, moreover, at the same time, mediation or being for self, which is for itself only through another, he, the master, stands in relation A, immediately to both, B, immediately to each through the other. The master relates himself to the bondsman mediatedly through independent existence, for that is precisely what keeps the bondsman in thrall. It is his claim from which he could not in struggle get away, and for that reason he proved himself to be dependent, to have his independence in the shape of thinghood. The master, however, is the power controlling this state of existence, for he has shown in the struggle that he holds it to be merely something negative, since he is the power dominating existence, while this existence again is the power controlling the other, the bondsman. The master holds, par consequence, this other in subordination. In the same way the master relates himself to the thing immediately through the bondsman, being a self-consciousness in the broad sense, also takes up a negative attitude to things and cancels them. But the thing is at the same time independent for him, and in consequence he cannot, with all his negating, get so far as to annihilate it outright and be done with it. That is to say, he merely works on it. To the master, on the other hand, by means of this mediating process, belongs the immediate relation in the sense of the pure negation of it. In other words, he gets the enjoyment. What mere desire did not attain, he now succeeds in attaining, viz., to have done with the thing and find satisfaction in enjoyment. Desire alone did not get the lengths of this, because of the independence of the thing. The master, however, who has interposed the bondsman between it and himself, thereby relates himself merely to the dependence of the thing, and enjoys it without qualification and without reserve. The aspect of its independence he leaves to the bondsman who labors upon it. A. Lordship. In these two moments, the master gets his recognition through an utter consciousness, for in them the latter affirms itself as unessential, both by working upon the thing and, on the other hand, by the fact of being dependent on a determinate existence. In neither case can this other get the mastery over existence and succeed in absolutely negating it. We have thus here this moment of recognition, viz., that the other consciousness cancels itself as self-existent, and ipso facto itself does what the first does to it. In the same way, we have the other moment that this action on the part of the second is the action proper of the first. For what is done by the bondsman is properly an action on the part of the master. The latter exists only for himself, that is, his essential nature. He is the negative power without qualification, a power to which the thing is naught, and he is thus the absolutely essential act in this situation, while the bondsman is not so. He is an unessential activity. But for recognition proper, there is needed the moment that what the master does to the other, he should also do to himself, and what the bondsman does to himself, he should do to the other also. On that account, a form of recognition has arisen that is one-sided and unequal. In all this, the unessential consciousness is for the master the object which embodies the truth of his certainty of himself. But it is evident that this object does not correspond to its notion, for just where the master has effectively achieved a lordship, he really finds that something has come about quite different from an independent consciousness. It is not an independent, but rather a dependent consciousness that he has achieved. He is thus not assured of self-existence as his truth. He finds that his truth is rather the unessential consciousness and the fortuitous, unessential action of that consciousness. The truth of the independent consciousness is accordingly the consciousness of the bondsman. This doubtless appears in the first instance outside itself, and not as the truth of self-consciousness, but just as lordship showed its essential nature to be the reverse of what it wants to be, so too bondage will, when completed, pass into the opposite of what it immediately is. Being a consciousness repressed within itself, it will enter into itself and change round into real and true independence. B. Fear. We have seen what bondage is only in relation to lordship, but it is a self-consciousness, and we have now to consider what it is in this regard in and for itself. In the first instance, the master is taken to be the essential reality for the state of bondage. Hence, for it, the truth is the independent consciousness existing for itself, although this truth is not taken yet as inherent in bondage itself. Still, it does in fact contain within itself this truth of pure negativity and self-existence, because it has experienced this reality within it. For this consciousness was not in peril and fear for this element or that, nor for this or that moment of time. It was afraid for its entire being. It felt the fear of this, the sovereign master. It has been in that experience melted to its inmost soul, has trembled throughout its every fiber, and all that was fixed and steadfast has quaked within it. This complete perturbation of its entire substance, this absolute dissolution of all its stability into fluent continuity, is, however, the simple, ultimate nature of self-consciousness, absolute negativity, pure self-referent existence, which consequently is involved in this type of consciousness. This moment of pure self-experience is moreover a fact for it, for in the master it finds this as its object. Further, this bondsman's consciousness is not only this total dissolution in a general way. In serving and toiling, the bondsman actually carries this out. By serving, he cancels in every particular aspect his dependence on and attachment to natural existence, and by his work removes this existence away. The feeling of absolute power, however, realized both in general and in the particular form of service, is only dissolution implicitly. And albeit the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, consciousness is not therein aware of being self-existent. Through work and labor, however, this consciousness of the bondsman comes to itself. In the moment which corresponds to desire in the case of the master's consciousness, the aspect of the non-essential relation to the thing seemed to fall to the lot of the servant, since the thing here retained its independence. Desire has reserved to itself the pure negating of the object, and thereby unalloyed feeling of self. This satisfaction, however, just for that reason, is itself only a state of evanescence, for it lacks objectivity or subsistence. Labor, on the other hand, is desire restrained and checked, evanescence delayed and postponed. In other words, labor shapes and fashions the thing. The negative relation to the object passes into the form of the object, into something that is permanent and remains, because it is just for the laborer that the object has independence. This negative mediating agency, this activity giving shape and form, is at the same time the individual existence, the pure self-existence of that consciousness, which now in the work it does is externalized and passes into the condition of permanence. The consciousness that toils and serves accordingly attains by this means the direct apprehension of that independent being as itself.